Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 601 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we're talking about smartphones. We're talking about how to parent kids who want smartphones. And we're also talking about AI. Now, I just read a great book. It was called The Resistors. I'll link to it in the show notes if you're interested. But it's a dystopian novel in the future, not so long from now, in which AI has taken over the world. Now, the book got me thinking about how tech has changed so much in just 25 years. Think about it. Go back to 2000-ish, right? The internet was on a clunky desktop in the corner of your house. You chatted on Instant Messenger. You went to a website or two here or there. Maybe you were on MySpace. Maybe you pirated some music on Napster, but that was about it. Fast forward 25 years, and here we are. Assuming tech continues to accelerate at breakneck pace, where on earth are we going to be in another 25 years? My point is to say that we need to be intentional right now about our tech use. We have to have a strategy in place for ourselves and for our households, because if we don't, we'll be swept away if we haven't already been swept away, frankly. Now, my guest today, he's never owned a smartphone. In part one, I'm asking him all the details on that. How does he get around digital gates like using an Uber? Has he ever felt like he's missing out? In part two, we're talking about his children. They do not have smartphones. They do not have video game consoles. How does he parent around tech in ways that don't make him the meanest dad in the world in their eyes? That's part two. And then finally, in part three, we're talking about AI. Maybe you've noticed we are moving from the attention economy and into the affection economy, in which AI is increasingly soliciting our affection. AI bots, they want to be our friends. They want to be our therapist. Heck, they even want to be our lover if we're down for that. Should we be concerned? And if we're already quite concerned, what should we be doing right now? That's what we're talking about today, and we're talking about it with Andrew Broman. He is the founder of frugalmatic.com, and he's also someone, I'll say on a personal level, whose work I've been following for a good few years now. So I'm so thrilled and so honored to have you on the show today, Andrew. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about what you do. Tell us about frugalmatic.com. Tell us everything we need to know.
So I live here in southern Wisconsin with my family. I have a wife and 2 kids, a daughter in high school and a son in middle school. Summer is my favorite time of year because I'm a teacher, and so I have off in my summers, and I spend a lot of time doing do-it-yourself projects around the house. On the side, I've also been doing Frugalmatic for the past 6 years, and it's about I guess I would describe it as about being frugal in every aspect of your life, not just with your money, but also your time. I put a special emphasis talking about being physically active and avoiding a sedentary lifestyle. And that kind of ties into my approach to what I would call digital minimalism and just being aware of how you're using devices, digital media, so that you're living the most fulfilling life possible for yourself.
I like that explanation. And I'll say, in my opinion, as a reader, I view Frugalmatic as a tool to help us all live more intentionally instead of giving away our time, effort, energy, money to this, that, and the other thing. It's about living with intention so that we know where our time, effort, energy, money is going and we're stewarding it towards the places we want it to go.
For sure. Yeah, I think you captured that well.
All right. Today we're talking about reducing digital noise, and we're talking about especially the proliferation of smartphones. I know from talking to you offline that you have never had a smartphone. That's amazing. First of all, that's amazing. Do you feel like you're missing out on something?
No, I can't honestly say that I've ever felt like I'm missing out on something. If anything, I've been more concerned about losing access to certain things that people now use smartphones to gain access to. But in how I watch people use their phone, I usually feel pretty validated as to why I don't want one and why I continue to choose not to have a smartphone. The reasons have changed a little bit over the years. At different points, I've considered getting a smartphone, but I've never really come close to pulling the trigger on it, I guess you could say.
Well, why not? Smartphones have been out for what? Almost 20 years now. Are there reasons as to over the 20 years that you've thought to yourself, "No, I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna hold off another 6 months," or "I'm gonna hold off another year?"
My main concern with it is just in watching how people use it, how really they're serving the technology and it's less about the technology serving them. And I
Mm.
haven't seen anything that really changes that. I think that's almost been the case from day one. And you could make the argument that these companies have only gotten better at drawing people into these phones. And we've all read the studies or read about the studies where they talk about how phones aren't improving our mental health, aren't necessarily making us happier. And I've yet to see anything that's changed that dynamic. In fact, you're seeing more companies come out with versions of dumb phones because I think more and more people are becoming aware of the pitfalls of habitually using these devices.
Yeah. That is so fascinating to me because 99.9% of Americans just hopped on the smartphone bandwagon. I remember first it was Blackberries for super important business people. And then shortly after that, the first iPhone came out and it was marketed to the masses. I'll say for myself, I did not think about whether this tech would be serving me or whether I would be serving the tech. I just bought one because everybody else was. So kudos to you for saying, wait, I'm going to hold off. And then here we are almost 20 years later. You've held off 20 full years. But you mentioned earlier that not having a smartphone might be restricting access for you for certain things. I'm thinking like a plane ticket. How do you get on a plane? Are you still printing out your boarding pass or like getting in an Uber? You can't print anything out to get in an Uber. That's purely on a smartphone. So, how are you getting around those digital gates, let's say?
Yeah, and so some sacrifices are made. I'll say that we don't have a lot of Uber use in our community, so I haven't had to deal with that. Certainly with venues, e-ticketing has become a big thing, and I'd say that's probably been the biggest frustration. I know the NFL, for example, only does e-ticketing now. Fortunately, I can still go to Milwaukee Brewer games because they still have a paper ticket option. So there have been some things that have come up. I'd say it's mostly been i a slight inconvenience. I'm waiting for something more significant to happen. For example, if car insurance companies required you to have an app on your phone and to constantly carry this app or phone with you as you're driving as a condition of being able to obtain car insurance. If something like that were to develop, I would really have to think about, okay, how am I going to get around this? Because, of course, you need car insurance. It's just that hasn't happened yet. And I'm pretty vocal in expressing my displeasure with companies that only allow a smartphone option. I'm not saying it changes their minds, but I do feel it's important for anyone who decides to try to go down this dumb phone path to be vocal in a polite way, but to let those companies know that this isn't okay because guess what? Not everybody chooses this lifestyle, but why should they have to go without this service just because they don't have this phone? At least make them think about it a little bit.
Yeah. So this is a slight veering off course, but I will say that on the weekends, I try to turn off my phone either for a
Sure.
day or for the whole weekend because I do feel as though the smartphone is detracting from my quality of life. I can't really turn it off Monday through Friday for various reasons. But on the weekends, if my family's home, my core four, I can turn it off. And yet, I can only turn it off because my husband, my partner, leaves his on. So if there was some sort of emergency or someone needs to reach me in my life, they know that I turned mine off. And so they could just contact my husband and they'll get in touch with me. And so that's a long way of asking you, does your partner have a smartphone? And do you feel as though you're maybe relying on them here or there or in those instances where you need the capability of a smartphone, but you don't have one yourself?
Sure, yes, and my wife, she works in the field of fundraising, and she does have a smartphone and will insist that she does need it, and I'm not in a position, and I don't question whether people need their phone or not, because I do think in certain professions, you do need your phone, and for her, social networking is really important. It's at the core of fundraising. I will say that if there are certain events and it requires an e-ticket, she'll have that e-ticket, and she'll have my ticket on it. So, I guess you could say that is a little bit of a cheat code that I've been able to use. But you were asking about attention span, right?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, that's the big one for me that I've noticed a noticeable decline in my own attention span. I try and put my phone away, put it out of sight, supposedly out of mind, and then I try and pick up a book or a magazine and try and read it. The phone is just constantly pulling at my attention so that I can't actually sit down and read the book or the magazine. And I do find, as I said, that shutting it off helps. It shuts the phone off, but it also shuts off the portion of my mind that thinks that I need to constantly check my phone. I don't think that's scientific at all or based in biology at all, but it works for me. And then when I do sit down and read the book or the magazine, it takes me several pages, several paragraphs to actually focus on it. My mind is here, there, everywhere. So that's the noticeable one. But I'm wondering, perhaps because you haven't brought a smartphone into your life, your attention span hasn't been negatively impacted. But do you have any thoughts for me? I've been going back and forth with getting a dumb phone and just saying goodbye to the smartphone altogether. I haven't pulled the trigger on that. But assuming I'm not pulling the trigger on that, do you have any
Well,
tips?
I mean, I will say I don't think I necessarily have this amazing attention span. I think our culture as a whole, our attention spans have shrunk.
Yeah.
And no one's immune to that, whether or not you have a smartphone or not. I just think the nature of media has just our attention spans are just getting smaller and smaller. And you're doing the kinds of things that I think someone should do if they wanna push back against that, which is to turn off the things that create that short attention span, and then also and it sounds like you already do it, but then turn to things that old technologies created at a time when people had larger attention spans, so that you're stretching out your attention span. So you mentioned the difficulty in getting into a book. That's because books really require a commitment of your attention, and it sounds to me like you're doing the right thing where you're kinda pushing back, you're kinda trying to take that attention span and stretch it like a rubber band. I think movies too, old movies. I read an article a couple months ago about film school and how students in film school, the professors were complaining that they weren't able to sit through movies, like an hour and a half, 2-hour movie. And of course, the irony is they're there in film school to learn how to make films, and they don't have the attention span to sit through a movie. So I think movies are one of those things that helps us expand that attention span a little bit. So the more you can be involved in that kind of thing, or anything really that requires more attention, I think that's a good way to push back against that problem.
You're using the phrase pushing back, but I call it friction. Just adding a little bit of friction in my life as a means of, again, using your words, pushing back. But I'm interested because for me and my personal life, pushing back is hard. This thing is just constantly vying for my attention with its flashiness, its pings, its dings, its colors. It's the whole thing. And so, yeah, I've been trying to add some friction with mixed results. But I want to talk about your children because your children seem to be about the same or just like slightly older than my own children. You have a daughter who's in high school. Walk me through the conversations you're having with her. How are you handling technology with her and your son? I need to know all the things because I feel like I'm floundering in the ocean
Mhm.
of smartphones and I don't know what to do.
And it's not I will say it's not easy for parents. As a middle school teacher, I'm aware of parents wrestling with this issue themselves, and so it's tough because, like we talked at the beginning, smartphones are everywhere. Kids are getting them at younger and younger ages, so that you're even starting to see them show up in elementary school. So it's not an easy task, and I've gone into this knowing that, and so I'd say, first off, the issues with girls and boys are slightly different. I'll talk about that in a minute, but with both our kids, we started having conversations about smartphones and tablets and video game systems really early on, like kindergarten, before they even really were that aware of the devices or wanted them. But what we basically talked to them about is that we said that in the future, your friends are going to have these devices. They're going to have video game systems. They're going to have smartphones. They're going to enjoy them. They're going to have fun on them. But I want you to know now that you are not going to have them. And so, what we try to do is set expectations really early on. And at the same time, say, but we want you to have fun. We want you to have a good time. I want you to think about other things that you can do in place of these things because you're not going to have them. Over the years, then we talked a little bit more about the why. Like, why are we concerned about these things? At kindergarten, you don't start talking about algorithms. But as they got older, then we had them watch, and I don't know if you've seen it, the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma.
Yep,
Uh,
saw it.
yeah. So at some point then I thought they were ready to see at least part of that. And I really like that because that did a really nice job of explaining the why. It dramatized it. And with our daughter especially, we talked about what makes these so appealing and how these companies work to, draw you in and make it so difficult to put down your phone. And over time, as her friends did get these devices, she saw that playing out. I think it really helped to have these conversations early on because it established credibility. At the same time, I didn't have a smartphone, and when I talked about earlier, my reasons have changed over the years. One of the reasons I don't have a smartphone now is so I can model for my kids so that they can see, "Oh, it is possible to live without this device." I think part of the thing is that kids see how their parents are using these devices and other adults, and they don't think it's possible to live without these devices. So the idea of not having one seems a little crazy to them because you need these devices. People are on them all the time. How could I live without this device? Because everyone around me is on it. So I wanted to show that, hey, in fact, you actually don't need it. So that became one of my major motivations for not having one, despite dealing with all the digital gate issues we talked about earlier. So when our daughter got to high school, I wanted her to have a phone. There are no public telephones anymore. I need to know when she's done with sports, when to pick her up and that kind of stuff. So we did settle on a device called the light phone. I wouldn't say she was super excited to get it, but I think over time it's growing on her. And the thing about the light phone is the form factor. Her being a teenager, it looks a little like a smartphone, the form factor meaning how it actually looks. She sees my flip phone and it's kinda a little bit of an embarrassment. I've brought it out to take pictures at times and, like, she tries to knock down my hand like, "Dad, don't do that." So she's sensitive to the social stigma maybe around a flip phone,
Yeah.
but at the same time, she's developed a sense of humor about it. And so when it did come time to get a cell phone for her, mind you, all her peers have smartphones, she was accepting of it. I think I'd like to think it's because of the groundwork that we've put into place before that, but even then, it's a tough task for parents. This is not an easy task for them.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to know how you chose the light phone. I know a little bit about it. Talk to me about how you chose that specific phone for your daughter. Can she text? And if so, can she text friends on Apple things? Because the big thing my daughter wants is she wants unfettered texting with people who use iPhone things.
So as far as I know, she can text whoever it is. I don't know how it appears on people who have the Apple devices, how it shows up on that, but I think she can just text whoever she wants. I know she spends a lot of time texting. Even though she has this dumb phone, she still spends a pretty good amount of time on it, and I'm okay with that. It gives her a way to be in touch with her friends. At the same time, I guess I like the light phone. It was designed by a former Google executive. I would say it's as close to cool as you can get for a dumb phone. I also know that they're working pretty aggressively on trying to deal with some of these digital gates so that they are coming out with, and I'm not sure if it's been released or not, but they're working on an authenticator app. That's a problem people have where they need to authenticate accounts using a smartphone. And so this app would allow on the light phone would allow people to do that authentication. I don't know where it's gone, but I know they have said that they've been trying to work with the NFL on developing some kind of e-ticket system. So I guess I'm saying that company is sensitive to these issues, and then you can get this device, and when these apps become available, you can put them on them. They also come unlocked, so you don't need a subscription, which I like. I do know there is that issue with the carriers that you mentioned, and I think that's partly because they wanted to get that light phone out. It had been in development for so long that they decided to put it out with limited carrier availability, so I'm hopeful that the number of carriers will expand over time.
Yeah.
So but and I don't have any affiliation with light phone, by the way, I just noticed that I think it's probably the best, but our daughter did she was supposed to get this phone in April and didn't end up getting it till November, so there was actually a period of time in high school where she didn't have any phone, and she survived, but it actually wasn't as bad as you might think.
I love it. Now, you have a son who's younger. Is he in middle school?
Yeah, yeah, he's in middle school. So, with boys, one of the big things is video games, and so our conversations, again, starting around kindergarten, was to explain, "Your friends are gonna get really involved in video games. We're not going to get a video game system, but again, let's talk about what are some of the things that you're really interested in, and then from a parent perspective, I wanna feed that as much as I can." So, his interests related to sports, and he's really into Legos. I don't wanna stifle that, I wanna allow him to go as deep into that stuff as he wants,
Yeah.
knowing that he hears a lot about video games at school, and I think there was a period of time where he was feeling left out, but at least at this point, he's at that stage where, "Okay, I've heard about it. I don't think I'm missing out as much as maybe my friends think I'm missing out. I'm okay with it." So, he's come to terms with that. We've talked to him about how video games are largely a marketing scheme to some extent. His friends spend a lot of money on these things. They don't realize that's how these games are set up to
Mm.
get you to go to your parents to buy whatever little skin or armor that your character needs, but it's and then on top of that, subscriptions or whatever else, but they're caught up in this marketing game and they're not aware of it. And when we talk to our son about video games, we say, "This is how these work nowadays." They're trying to get kids to spend as much money as they can just to play the games, and we have a problem with that. So
Can I just pause you and say I have not played a video game since I was probably in middle school myself in the mid 90s. It sounds like, and I did not know until talking to you, but it sounds like the days of plugging a cartridge or a CD into your Sega Genesis, those days
Oh,
are
yeah.
gone.
Yeah, that's yeah, I wanna take them actually. Now you're starting to see some arcades pop up, like classic arcades.
Mm,
We actually have plans to go to one in the city nearby, but I would like to take them to a classic arcade to show them this is how video games used to be. Like, these are the real games, the classic games,
yeah.
before you had to pay to play, which is the system that they've created now.
Okay, I read a blog post on Frugalmatic. You talked about how you find it important and perhaps helpful to install a landline for parents with children, and you don't want to give them the phone. You suggest a landline. Can you talk me through how a landline could perhaps be helpful for some of us parents?
Yeah, absolutely. I've found that the landline is really critical in terms of being able to communicate with your children and giving them a way to communicate with the outside world too. I think for parents, a lot of us have eliminated the landline because you have your cell phone. Why do you need a landline anymore? And then the kids use that cell phone if they need to call someone, grandparents, friends. But then eventually, I think there comes a point where the parent wants to be able to get a hold of the child when they're not at home, and so now what do? You get them a smartphone maybe, or possibly you could go with a landline, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because landlines, they run through the internet. Our landline is part of our internet package, so there's no copper wire involved anymore. If the internet goes out, your landline goes out. And it's fairly reasonable. I'm sure there's different rates all over the country, but we pay about $15 a month. And I like to use a landline too, actually. I just enjoy talking on a landline more than a cell phone if I can do it. And the other thing I like about the landline is I can call home and I'll always get somebody because a lot of people, including our own daughter, they have that phone on silent. Half the time it just goes to voicemail anyways. If I call our landline, it rings. If someone's home, someone's going to answer it. And so, in some ways, I find the landline a better way to get a hold of someone than a cell phone, at least our own immediate family. So I think the landline has been super helpful as far as addressing that concern. How do you communicate with each other? It's not a problem. You do get some spam calls. It actually shows up a lot of times as spam. It's kind of part of the deal, but I wouldn't say that's a huge problem.
It's so interesting. The landline was the first thing to go, and for my husband and I, when the smartphones came in, we're like, "We don't need this extra expense." And
Sure.
I had memories as a child myself. The phone would ring, we'd all rush to the phone to grab it because we think it's for us, and then if it is for you,
Right.
you gotta take the phone with the super long cord, and you gotta walk around the house and find a corner and be very quiet as you talk to your friend about secret stuff that went on during the day, and as a kid, I hated all of that. I just wanted a phone in my room, I wanted privacy. But as a parent who's concerned about what my middle school daughter is getting into and whether everything's above board, I would love a landline. Love it. And yes, we have looked into a landline as well, but the whole if the power goes out, the landline goes out. I don't love that. What happened to the copper wires?
I know in some communities it's still available, but it's really expensive. And you're right. Yeah. If the power goes out, there goes your phone. But
Mhm.
I don't know how often does the power go out for you. It has here once in a while, but for the most part, I would say it's pretty infrequent where the landline isn't available for us, but
All right. So I want to talk big picture about smartphone use and intentional living. I personally have begun to look at my time on my smartphone in the same vein as I would binging on junk food or binging on reality television or buying junk at the store that I don't really need. It's synonymous with a habit that feels good in the short term, makes me feel better, but long term doesn't support my goals, doesn't support my desire to be the best possible Stephanie I can be. I am again viewing smartphone use as yes, this is a tool, but we have to put up barriers so that we're not abandoning our long term goals. And along that same vein, too, it's a learning experience. So if I'm putting up barriers and I'm finding that I'm not able to stick to the barriers that I myself put up, it's then also on me to pivot accordingly. And so I guess I'm just wondering whether any of that resonates with you because I always go back to the fact that Steve Jobs didn't even let his own kids use his own invention. Shouldn't that make us all think critically about this extremely powerful technology and unfettered use?
Yeah, and look, if adults have these kinds of struggles, imagine what it's like for a kid who isn't even prepared to handle that kind of temptation, really. But yeah, I think your analogy is a good one, the comparison to junk food. And of course, people are doing all sorts of things to try to limit how much time they spend. I've heard of this thing becoming pretty popular called a brick. I don't know exactly how it works, but basically it's a product that restricts your ability to access certain things on your phone. And so there is this kind of like cat and mouse thing going on with smartphone owners. I don't think I have any sort of super amount of willpower. That's one of the reasons I don't have a smartphone because I feel as if I did have one, I would probably be on it just like everybody else. I know some
Yeah.
people like there's a writer, Cal Newport. He wrote a book called Digital Minimalism. I think he has a smartphone, and I think he says in the book how he's able to separate good use from bad use. And yeah, kudos to those people who can do it. I do think it's possible. I'm not saying I'd be the one that could do it. My solution is just to like eliminate the access. Access is what I think creates the problems. If you look at, for example, if you look at sports betting used to be a taboo. You could bet in Vegas and Atlantic, and if you knew a bookie, that was kind of shady, right? But now you can bet on your phone, and now sports betting's everywhere, and the addiction problems related to it are just skyrocketing. But that's an access issue, right? We haven't suddenly become a nation that values sports betting necessarily, but because we have such easy access to it, you're seeing it just spiral. And it's kind of like with the junk food. If I buy 4 gallons of ice cream, I can tell myself I'm going to ration this out over the whole year, right? And everyone here knows that's not going to happen, right? So the real solution is just not to get the ice cream or you go out for ice cream once in a while, but I wouldn't dare bring 4 gallons of ice cream home because that's gonna be gone within relative short period of time. So, I don't have a good answer for how do people have a smartphone and still control this back and forth with their phone. I think that's really hard to do, be able to use a smartphone in a healthy way. I think some people can do it, and again, I would say kudos to them because I think that takes a lot of willpower, it takes a lot of focus, a lot of drive. The makers of these devices have made them so appealing that it's such a big task even for adults to be able to use it in a very moderate way.
Yeah, that's such a great answer, and I need to talk to you about ice cream really quick because this is, again, a detour, but really quick. My husband you don't have Market Basket where you live, but here in New England, Market Basket is huge for sales. My husband went to Market Basket. They were having a sale on Ben& and Jerry's. It was like, if you sign up for this promotion, you buy one, get 4 free, and then they had another promotion on top of that and promotion. Long story short, this is a true story. My husband came home with 18 pints of ice cream, Ben& and Jerry's. And we have a deep freezer, and we thought to ourselves, "Oh, we have ice cream for the next year. Oh my gosh. We are not gonna touch this. We got ice cream for 25 cents a pint. Amazing. We are good." You wanna know, Andrew, how long that ice cream lasted? It was about 3 weeks. We ate 20
Uh,
pints of
I
ice cream in 3
I
weeks.
was go I was gonna say a month, so that's kinda close. Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that for sure.
It's like, as an adult by definition does not have wise parents moderating their use of anything, whether it be ice cream, whether it be smartphones, whether it be video games, whatever it is. It's on us. We're supposedly mature enough to moderate our own consumption. However, it's really darn hard as an adult to moderate our use or consumption of things, and many of us don't. And so, what I love about Frugalmatic is you make clear and make plain the point that if we try to moderate and we find that we actually can't, which that's not a fault of us, by the way, because you made the point so clearly that these companies are doing everything in their power to keep these tech companies are doing everything in their power to keep us logged on. The attention economy is here to stay. But if we try to moderate and we find that we can't, it is then on us to pivot accordingly, I think, is what I get from you and your answer there. And so thank you
And
for
I think
letting me. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and I think more people are trying to do that pivot. They want to do that pivot, and but it can be scary, and you just have to be in the right place, I think, to be able to actually say, "Okay, I'm gonna give up the smartphone here. I'm gonna just try something else."
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple minutes, and I do want to talk to you about AI, another emerging technology that is different from smartphones in many senses. But in one sense, when smartphones came out and nobody balked, nobody was really concerned. It was just unleashed and everybody ate it up. But with the case of AI, it seems to me as though there's a little bit more
Pushback.
reticence. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
for
so,
sure.
what are your thoughts on AI? How do you use it? Do you use it? Talk to me.
I'll just say yes for certain things. I think it's a good example of just asking that question again, that is the technology serving you or are you serving the technology? I think in certain instances, AI can be super helpful to serve you. And in my own life, do it yourself projects are a great example where AI has helped me feel more confident in the projects that I'm doing, has allowed me to do, I guess you could say, more adventurous projects. We talk about the attention economy as it relates to social media. I think AI is a little bit different, and I'm not the one who's coined this phrase, but I agree with it. They talk about the attachment economy. And so I think that's where you need to be careful and ask yourself, okay, what's the purpose of me using AI? Am I developing an attachment with this? Is it
Mhm.
trying to substitute as a relationship? Is this thing trying to be a companion for me? Because I think that attachment is going to be the profit driver for these AI companies. I like to think of it more as just a search engine on steroids. Frequently use the AI mode in a Google search. I'm typing answers and receiving the responses. It's just cutting through a lot of stuff that before I would have to be the one on the do it yourself forum trying to sort out answers that made sense. I would be sitting there watching the 20-minute YouTube video, trying to glean some important information out of it. And so AI is doing that for me, and that's saving time and it's freeing me up to actually work with my hands and do things that I want to get done around the house. And so, at least for me, I think AI definitely does have a place in people's lives where it can be beneficial. I know there's a big thing with concerns about data centers and the economy and these larger issues. And I guess I'm not speaking to that. I think that's almost a separate discussion. But I don't see AI in and of itself as a problem. In the same way, I don't see the internet necessarily as a problem. Obviously, I have a website, so it's good for communicating ideas, right? But for having a dumb phone and resisting the smartphone, sometimes I can come across as anti-technology, but it's really not the case. It's just a question of, is this technology fulfilling your lifestyle in a healthy way?
Yeah, what I think you're speaking to is one use of AI, which is getting stuff done faster, getting the answer you need faster. But then there's this whole other use of AI, which in your view and definitely in mine is much more concerning. It's the using an AI bot as a substitute for human connection. And it sounds like that's where you're drawing the line. And I love that line because it's a slippery slope, right? You mentioned using Google's AI answer. That's the first thing that comes up. We Google now, you ask a
Uh,
question. AI is just trawling websites and taking people's hard earned words and just putting it as a little thing on AI. That's ethically perhaps
yeah,
concerning and definitely environmentally concerning. But then there's also the using AI as a friend or as a romantic partner or as a counselor, a therapist. And so I think you drew the line really well there. But if you have anything else to add, I'd take it.
yeah, there are some subtleties here that maybe we haven't talked about. I don't use AI, for example, to do my writing. I don't want AI to think for me. I
Mm.
want AI to help me maybe understand a concept that I don't know a lot about, specifically do it yourself projects around. I know enough to be dangerous is my issue with these projects. So I'd like to be less dangerous with these projects to build out my understanding, but not to do the thinking for me. And I will admit, I think that's a fine line. I guess I feel like I know it when I come up against it. As far as how I interact with AI, I don't do voice mode because I wanna keep it on that sort of search engine written response level. That's another little element. I don't like the AI of taking this kinda human form. I am wary of that too.
So you won't be getting one of the humanoid robots that are going to be sold to us in the next 6-ish months?
Yeah, no, no, I've heard about that coming, and that's a concern too because I told you how frugalmatic I talk about. One of my things is building physical fitness into your day through the sorts of things that we would refer to as chores or tasks, and so this idea of using AI then to do all those little things that made us a little bit more physically active is concerning as well, I would say.
All right. I won't be getting a humanoid robot either. But oh my goodness, Andrew, what a conversation. Please tell us where we can find more of you, where we can find Frugalmatic, all the things.
Yeah, so my website, just frugalmatic.com, and that's frugal and then automatic. So, but frugalmatic.com, and that's where you'll find my website. I break down the topics into three different areas: everyday fitness, digital minimalism, and simple living. So, yeah, that's kind of how the website's set up. And go ahead and check it out. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll link to frugalmatic.com in the show notes. But Andrew, really great conversation. You have so much wisdom to share, and I thank you for sharing it with my audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, that's a wrap. My friends, show notes are at mamaminimalist.com/601. Now, I want to hear from you if you have anything to say on tech, on AI, on how tech's impacting your life, on how you're parenting around tech. This is a topic that really just both interests me, fascinates me, and also vexes me as someone who has a smartphone, struggles with their use, has children who want smartphones and aren't getting them. Like, it's just a constant struggle on my end. I'm on the struggle bus. So if you have any thoughts, tips, camaraderie, help to offer, please shoot me an email. And depending on the responses I get, we'll see what I do with them. But I want to hear from you. And thank you so much. Next week, I will be on vacation with my family. So no show, but we'll see you in 2 weeks. As always, reach out if you need me. Enjoy the last few weeks of summer, my friends. Oh my gosh, how is it almost over already? See you soon and take care.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.